I'm in Switzerland, 9/11 happens.
Reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers.
I look at my calendar and I noticed I had a meeting in the World Trade Center that Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., which I canceled to go on this trip.
If BlackRock ends up owning all the Bitcoin, does that create an issue for the world?
Somewhere around 2013, one of the big Bitcoin miners out of China actually gained 50.1% control of all Bitcoin, and they gave it back. The American healthcare system is designed for three things. It's designed to get you sick and keep you sick as long as possible without killing you.
You actually got out of New York before 9/11 because you have a psychic relative.
She called me up in August 2001 and she said, well, I want you to take a trip. I want you out of New York City the first 2 weeks of September. You know, you have to remember, if you go back a few thousand years when most of our early religions were formed, right? If somebody said, yeah, I saw a 900-foot Jesus in my backyard, there was no reason to disbelieve them. And that's how religions grew up. We know the avalanche is coming. It's snowing. We don't know which snowflake is going to cause it all to start go, but at some point it's going to go.
In this conversation with Salim, we discuss why the more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to reject any evidence that threatens what you already believe, and also why large organizations have an immune system that's designed to suppress any idea that would actually work. And also, we dive a bit into this story about how a psychic relative of Salim actually stopped Salim from entering the World Trade Center on 9/11. This is part one of the highlights from our conversation with Salim on our live show, Memes and Markets. Let's dive in.
Salim, how are you today?
Very well, thanks.
Awesome. Keith, how's Bangkok, man?
Man, it's special. I'm excited about it. Just getting settled in, but it should be cool.
So Salim,
How long have you
lived...
been there?
Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Would you say
How long
something?
have you been in Bangkok?
Oh, it's my second day.
Oh, right. Oh, so
Yeah.
it's literally emptying the suitcases. Are you planning to be there for a while?
I am kind of just going for it, just giving it a shot.
Salim,
Very cool.
you've lived all over the place. Have you ever lived in that area of the world?
No, but I've spent quite a bit of time there. Years ago, I did the around the world backpacking trip and spent like several months crossing the whole of Indonesia.
Wow.
And I go to Thailand and Malaysia pretty often for business.
Amazing. Amazing. Cool. So in that area of the world, are they as obsessed with AI as the West?
No, mostly because they're not on the cutting edge of tech build out. They are building data centers pretty as aggressively as they can. They see things coming, but they're not on the edge of the conversation.
Okay. Interesting. So Keith, where do you want to start with Salim today? There's so many angles we can go down this because Salim's a crypto guy and an AI guy, which is kind of everything we want in a guest. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, Salim, I wanted to start off by asking you, why are you a transhumanist? Apparently that's what people are calling you. Talk to us about that. And what does that mean?
Why am I a transhumanist? So when I was building Singularity, you guys know my background a bit, or should I
Yes.
just...
Yeah, give it to everyone else, but we know it.
All right. So Canadian, originally from India, 10 years in Europe, 20 years in the US. So I'm pretty confused. Degrees in computing and theoretical physics, and that from Waterloo. And then I went to, when I got to Silicon Valley, I ended up as the head of innovation at Yahoo, running their incubator. Learned a fundamental lesson that when you try anything disruptive in a legacy environment, the immune system attacks you. And went from that to helping build out Singularity University, which I built I was CEO for the first 2-3 years, and then I ran all the programs for another few years after that. And so that's kind of where the real journey starts. And then I wrote this book, Exponential Organizations, and I've been chasing that around ever since. Book did way better than I expected. Publisher very happy, wife less happy. And we built a global community around the book now that's now about 40,000 people that are consultants, technologists, innovators, entrepreneurs. They use the mechanisms in the model in the book to build EXOs, as we call them. So I joined the board of the X Prize Foundation a few years ago, Peter Diamandis' foundation, and I'm trying to shepherd my community and kind of help communicate the radical transformation that's happening in the world right now. So that's the very quick summary. Remind me of the question. I forgot it already.
Go ahead, Keith.
Why are you a transhumanist?
Oh, why am I a transhumanist? Okay, so when the first article came out about Singularity University, was in CNET, and it said NASA announces Singularity University, which is being led by Peter Diamandis, Ray Kurzweil, and the prominent transhumanist Salim Ismail. And I literally had to go, what the hell is a transhumanist? And I had to look it up because I'd never heard the term before. So a transhumanist is apparently somebody that augments themselves via technology. And honestly, I have no idea what that means. Keith, you got headphones on, you've augmented yourself. Does that mean you're a transhumanist? I don't know. It turns out the minute you get a vaccination as a child, you're technically a cyborg. And so does that make you a transhumanist? So I think we've been using technology from the beginning of time to augment ourselves, spectacles, contact lenses, whatever. So I think that's a kind of a moot point. We use technology to make our lives better in 1,000 different ways. So I think I think the traditional term is you put technology into yourself to augment yourself, like RFID chips under the skin, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a bit, in that traditional sense, I'm not really a transhumanist. If we've got a brain computing interface, I'd rather use the phone, which is on the outside and can be upgraded easily, rather than trying to stick things inside of the body where they can get infected and you can't upgrade them as easily. That's my quick
So,
answer to that.
so no Neuralink for you.
Not certainly not. I don't want to be the first one. Let's just put it that way. And it turns out the brain upgrades more easily. The phone upgrades more easily outside the brain than inside the brain.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes complete sense. And I listen to you talk on the Moonshots pod all the time, and so I know that
So
you're.
you know a lot of my philosophy around some of this stuff.
I do. Yes, I listen to you
Okay.
literally every single week. So yeah.
Wow.
I help
Okay.
deal with the titles and thumbs for the show, so I have to listen to everything that you say, and it's always awesome stuff. But there's one. I was listening to your older talks because I've obviously listened to you all your current opinions, but I want to go back and see how things have changed. And there was one quote from a talk that I really think is so prevalent right now, where you
Okay.
said, if you attempt disruptive innovation in any large organizations, its immune system will come and attack you. Can you
Yeah.
explain what that means and how that practically applies to tech today?
Yeah. So all organizational designs, certainly traditional organizational designs, are top-down pyramid-style military command and control structures, right? And they're designed for two things. Typical organizations are designed for efficiency and for predictability. Those two attributes. So if you're Procter and Gamble, you're trying to deliver the same box of Tide into 1 million retail locations at the same level of quality. Same with McDonald's, for example. But today, in a world as volatile, you need to be architected for adaptability, flexibility, agility, and speed, which is very different from traditional military style command and control structures, which are designed for resisting change and withstanding risk. Okay? Now, that worked in a time when markets didn't change very often, et cetera, et cetera. But we're seeing the most volatile business era in the history of mankind. And so therefore, those old structures literally don't work. And when I was at Yahoo, I was running their incubator, and our job was, okay, there's 3,000 ideas across Yahoo. At any time, we should be building the top 5. That was the directive we had from Jerry Yang, who was the CEO at the time. And I was like, well, how much more fun could anybody have than that, right? So we put together a team of like 30 the best developers in the world, divided into 5 teams, and we were building stuff out. And it turned out the more disruptive an idea we came up with, the less the company could handle it. Why? Because it had got itself organized in a classic matrix structure with products on the verticals and horizontals like legal, HR, branding, privacy, etc. And every time we were trying to do something, you have to get clearance from all those layers, which takes time. And the structure disincents risk-taking. Like the legal guy wants the same terms of service across all 120 Yahoo web properties. He doesn't want somebody going rogue. His life's a mess otherwise, right? And so the org structure for Yahoo is antithetical to the industry they're in. Because if you're on the consumer internet, the two characteristics you better have are speed and risk.
Yes.
Right. And so I kept poking the mothership going, listen, guys, we're structured the wrong way. And so, and then I was talking to the CTO of Autodesk and complaining, like, how the hell do you deal with this? Because I'm facing this. And he goes, oh, you have an immune system problem. And I went, ding, that's it. And so that's been part of my verbology ever since. And it's bad in big companies. This is why big companies can't innovate. They cannot deal with disruptive innovation. This is why Microsoft invests in OpenAI rather than trying to build it itself. Okay, because the antibodies in the company will attack that, and this is true for every large organization. But it's actually worse in public sector, because there we have the regulatory is the immune system. We have bankers fighting Bitcoin. We have taxis fighting Uber. And we've decided to solve on focusing this problem after the book came out, because if you don't solve that immune system problem, it doesn't matter what the tech breakthroughs are, we can't implement them. Right.
Totally.
So we spent quite a bit of time solving for that. And we started with big companies. We crafted a 10-week engagement that we piloted with Procter & Gamble and said, all right, give us your worst performing division. We're going to see if we can hack culture at scale. And now we've done it like 100 times with big companies around the world, Black & Decker, HP, Visa, etc. And then we formed a nonprofit to do the same thing in public sector, because now you need to change policy, and that's much harder. And it takes 16 weeks, but it works. We've done it like 6 or 7 times, most notably with the mayor of Miami a few years ago. So a lot of the buzz around Miami is we were able to get public sector to view disruptive technology as an opportunity, not a threat.
Keith actually went to the University of Miami, so
oh, dude. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Francis Suarez was absolutely, helping to lead some of the charge around that technology. Him and then Mike. I don't know if you would have known Mike. He was I think the CTO of the city at the time.
Okay. I didn't know Mike. I met Francis a bunch of times. I was named like the Entrepreneur of the Year in Miami a few years ago. And so I met him at the kind of the welcome gala for that. And the real work we did was actually with the mayor of Miami-Dade County.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And his name was
Cava.
Jimenez,
okay.
and then now Cava. And I kind of work with them both. And we were able to change that public sector perception. And then it becomes very much more, much easier to absorb disruptive ideas, right?
Totally.
It's not an automatic no.
Yes, which is what most things are. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, talk to any banker about Bitcoin and they get like hives and stuff.
Yes, they just so afraid so fast. It's crazy.
Yeah. They're all swimming in the soup of fiat currencies and they can't step out of the water there. And therefore anything outside that is a threat. There's actually, can I step sideways for a second? Because there's a really great and really important anthropological basis for this. Peter Diamandis observed this when he wrote the book Abundance, and he noted that we all have in the back of our brains this little organ that's called an amygdala. It's the size of like a walnut, and it's an evolutionary mechanism that's scanning for danger on a nonstop basis. Okay? It actually goes in front of your neocortex, and it's the first. All the senses go through the amygdala before they get to the brain. Okay. And so because 10,000 years ago, when we were running around the plains of Africa, if you heard a noise in the bushes, you ran because bad news could kill you. Okay. Good news doesn't kill you. So if you missed a piece of good news, you might miss some fruit that you could eat. If you missed a piece of bad news, you died. So our brains are literally 10 times more likely to pay attention to bad news as opposed to good news because of that survival bias. Which means that this is why Fox News does really well. If you watch Fox News, you're going to die this week, right? If you're lucky, it'll last till next week, but you're going to die next week. But you're going to die. And Peter calls CNN the crisis news network, right? Because you watch every kidnapping or bank robbery on real-time, high-definition, streamed to 20 devices. You literally think the world is going to go to hell, and you vote on that. And you end up with Trump or Brexit or Bolsonaro or whatever. So this is the incredibly difficult anthropological basis. And this becomes doubly hard when we come up with new technologies, because when you see a new technology like autonomous cars, the first reaction is danger.
Yes.
Because our brain, and the first reaction is, oh my God, ban the car because the car might kill somebody, right? As my colleague Brad Templeton used to say, we don't want to be killed by robots. We'd much rather be killed by drunk people, which is what's happening today. And so this is the kind of really difficult thing. Up to date, the only way of solving that we found is psychedelics. And
really?
So we have to figure out some basis around that.
You're watching the highlights from a conversation on our live show, Memes and Markets. Be sure to subscribe to this channel to make sure that you don't miss the best parts of our conversation from our live streams, where we go live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Now, back to the highlights.
Fascinating. So I have another quote here from another one of your podcasts, which is a point that's tightly connected to this, and one that I really agree with, is that you said human beings would rather be comfortable than happy.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that play out now with all of this, because this could be one of the best times ever to be alive, but fear is at a near all-time high, it seems.
Fear is at a near all-time high because people really resist the unknown, right? And the unknown represents danger. And so therefore they shy away from anything dangerous, even though it may be 10x better for them. Okay. And they have to overcome that. And there was an article that came out in Salon.com a few years ago. Okay. And the title of the article was "The Single Worst Discovery About the Brain Ever." That was the headline of the article. And it obviously kind of somewhat clickbait oriented. And what they did was they took people that had a deeply held religious or political belief, like abortion or a Republican or a Democrat or something, and then they gave them direct evidence that contradicted that belief structure. Okay, and they found three things happened. First was the rejection of the evidence. Fine, understandable. The second was a little more weird. It turned out in rejecting the evidence, it reinforced your belief structure. It was like a physics reaction of you push it away and you become stronger. And they were like, well, that's weird. The third, which is what led to the title of the article, was it turned out the more mathematically literate you were, the more likely you were to reject the evidence because you thought you knew, right? And that's depressing as hell, because that means you can never use an evidentiary basis to convince somebody of something. You have to use a narrative structure.
Yes.
And it was a really profound kind of observation about the human condition. And I go back to that. I once had a co-founder in one of my companies that kept tanking the company because he was comfortable being a genius and poor.
Mm.
And the more wealthy we became and the more successful, the more he was freaking out. And you're like, wow. So that was the root of that observation.
Yeah, I had the same thing when I had an employee who I actually only found it out when they showed the new Instagram feed where you could see what other people liked, because I didn't talk too much about politics or anything like that. And I found out that one of my key employees hated money. And I was like, okay, no wonder we're not going to make money here. Like obviously he hated every big company. He hated capitalism. I'm like, okay, well, no wonder he's sabotaging everything he touches. Like this only makes sense. And as a marketer by trade, everything you're saying makes total sense to me. And it's why the algorithms are so effective, is because they allow you to reinforce your confirmation biases, and then also to see the opposite opinion looking so wrong. They're really quite sophisticated. I actually tweeted something about that just last night. Go ahead, Salim.
Just a quick funny story here.
Yeah,
so
please.
I'm hiring people for Brickhouse, and this is Yahoo's incubator, and they gave me free reign to hire whoever I wanted. And we hired a guy called Evan Henshaw Plath, who was an American guy who grew up in England, and he ran the website protest.net. He was a full anarchist. And had been arrested for protesting WTO trade meetings and stuff, right? And the HR people at Yahoo are like, "Wait, who are you hiring?" And I said, "You said I could hire anybody. We want that kind of totally independence thinking in our world, right?" And my dad told me something very profound. He said, "Look, to be successful in the world today, you have to be an evidentiary, erudite free thinker." Free thinking meaning you have to be outside all the religious or structural biases that you've grown up in the world, like bankers with fiat currency. Erudite, you have to be clear in what you're able to say. And evidentiary, you have to go where the data tells you.
Totally.
And it's one of the more kind of interesting comments I've heard.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's also really hard to do. We got a question from the chat that actually connects to another point that I had written down, where you had said that, what was it, where you said that until you're 7, you're basically defining who you are becoming. I forget exactly how you said it, but RD says, the brain is interesting. Is this something you learn in childhood? Can you change the brain? You said something about 7 years old. What was that specific?
Yeah, the all religions, right, work in the following way. Do you take a young child before they're 10 or 12, and you give them an absolute truth, an assumptive truth, like Muhammad is the last prophet, Jesus is the son of God, Mary was a virgin, whatever it is. And then you bind it into them with ritual repetition and a lot of sweets, a lot of sugar.
Yes,
and you'll notice at all religious functions, there's a ton of sugar in there. Okay. And when then that wires into the brain of a young person before the neocortex forms, which is why the age is important. And then you've wired into the limbic system, and then when you try and provoke or kind of change that deeply held belief that Mary was a virgin, you evoke a fight or flight response. And so this is why the Jesuits have an old saying. They say, "Give me the boy until the age of 7, I give you the man," because we'll hack the kid in our way of thinking and tailor him that way. Now, how do you solve for that? You have to do a truckload of neuro-linguistic programming, Tony Robbins, landmark education type stuff. Psychedelics are a pretty effective way. We've got all these neuro plasticity things. Let me show you something. This is a gadget called a neurovisor. Right, I bought this recently. So you put it on, and it there's an app that flashes lights at you, and you play music at the same time, and it increases the plasticity of the brain.
No, you should put that on for a second, but leave it on your head for a second.
You want me to put on? There, it looks like that. Looks like
that looks awesome.
totally sure. You don't want to be in an airport lounge wearing this thing, but it's kind of incredible. Like you put on different types of programs depending on whether you're looking for relaxation or shape or whatever, and you can literally feel your brain rewiring itself. And the combination of sound and light flashes and binaural beats and whatever are all designed for doing that. Psychedelics is the easiest and most permanent way, but then you have to take psychedelics and go on a hero's journey.
Totally. Keith, you got something?
On that, I mean, there's been a lot of advancement. I think like Texas has been like super forward about some of the development of like psychedelic drugs as therapeutics and stuff like that. Do you follow any of that? I know it's like a budding industry. Do you invest in stuff like that, or you look at it?
I'm not invested just because I'm totally tapped out putting money into building this ecosystem and the few angel investments that I made. I'll give you one that I did invest in called Focus at Will. So a guy called Will Henshaw used to play guitar for the Eurythmics, the band from the 80s. He started building a platform of music that when you play the music, it's like a Pandora style streaming service. It puts your brain in a focused alpha state. Okay. And so when your brain is in that brain frequency, your productivity increases like 500%. It's like crazy. So if you're a software developer, or student, or a knowledge worker of any kind, this is like really like gold, right? Because 500% productivity is no joke. So I've done some stuff like that. I'm hugely enthusiastic about psychedelics. So a few years ago, I had a kind of a bit of a life-changing event where a political consulting firm out of Europe approached me, and they said, "Hey, we want to partner with you." And I said, "How?" And they said, "Oh, we use your book to advise heads of state." And I was like, "Completely not intended for that. What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, that's how we use it." And it turned out to be 36 presidents and prime ministers.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, including at the time the prime minister of Thailand. So I went to Thailand and I did a session with the prime minister in Bangkok and the top 50 CEOs in the cabinet and whatever. And once that's like a gift from the universe that you can't say no to. Like you have to, because we have a community and credibility and some reputation, but now we have access. And so I did a year of psychedelics to make sure my mind, body, and spirit was lined up for what was coming. It was kind of easily the most profound thing I've ever done. I'm a huge fan. They've now found, I think Colorado is the most advanced in terms of playing with this stuff. But they found you can cure PTSD and depression with one treatment of MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, different kind of psychedelics. It's kind of amazing the outcomes. Completely threatens the pharma industry.
Totally.
And so it's a huge kind of challenge. The immune system is strong in that world. I remember interviewing the head of Google Health at a conference a few years ago, and there's about 500 people in the audience, and I'm doing this interview in San Francisco. So I said, "Listen, I'm Canadian, totally do not understand the American healthcare system. Can you describe it?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's really easy. The American healthcare system is designed for 3 things. It's designed to get you sick and keep you sick as long as possible without killing you." And I'm like shocked, right? And the whole audience is like, yeah, that's about right. That's about right. And it just completely blew my mind. So some big differences in kind of attitude around some of that stuff.
So when you said that psychedelics were one of the most profound things that you ever experienced, whenever people describe psychedelics, they say similar things, but to someone on the outside, that's a very like arbitrary way of voicing it. Can you
Yeah,
speak to like
the
specific?
specifics.
Yeah, if
Yeah, let me
possible. I know
give
it's
you.
not easy.
No. I went pretty deep on this before I did any because I wanted to be sure as to what was going on. So somewhere around 2012, 2013, we had a lecturer come through Singularity University, and what he was doing was giving people different dosages of different psychedelics and putting them through an fMRI machine.
Okay.
Okay, so an fMRI machine allows you to scan the brain in real time. You can actually see a single neuron firing in the brain in real time in an fMRI machine. So you give somebody 50 milligrams of mushrooms versus 100 versus 200, and you see what neural circuits are
Gotcha.
lighting up or what neural circuits are being suppressed by that thing. And when I first saw that, I was like, well, that's cool because now we have a feedback loop, right?
Mm,
In the 70s, when they first discovered this stuff, uh, Steve Jobs and all these guys in Silicon Valley, they're just chucking stuff down. They didn't have really any idea what they were doing, any evidence, let's put it that way. But now we know exactly what happens. So take, for example, ayahuasca, the stuff in the Amazon that you drink, or the frog bufo, right? That's DMT, dimethyltryptamine, okay? And DMT is a molecule in your brain that's a naturally occurring hormone. It's released by your brain twice in your life. Okay, once at birth, once
when
at
death.
death. Go figure. Okay, we think they think it's because to ease the transformation from one state to another, one phase to another. Um, so they found in the Amazon that if you take this plant A and cross it with root B and pound it into a broth, it gives you a hunk of DMT, which goes through the blood-brain barrier. So you have essentially a near-death experience,
Mm,
and you have an out-of-body experience. And so people take this, and medically, what it does is it suppresses the parietal lobe, and where your parietal lobe is where your three-dimensional sense of self sits. So when you suppress that, you have access to your higher consciousness in a way that otherwise you have to do a truckload of meditation and tantra or whatever to get access to that. But now you get instant access to your higher divinity.
got it.
And so when you kind of connect the dots with the data, you're like, well, that makes sense. And so people drink this and they literally lift out of their body, depending on how much and the form in which you take it.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
and, and
Go ahead.
DMT is also released when you dream too. Am I incorrect about that?
It depends on the dreams, but yeah, like so. When you do tantric work or kundalini work, that's a DMT. When anybody has a religious experience, that's a DMT release. When people have a near-death experience and they see the white light in a tunnel, that's actually a DMT release in the brain. So there's artificial ways of getting to it, uh, but you have to do years of Kundalini work before you can get to that. And some dream states result in a DMT release.
I was going to bring this up later, but I feel like the topic calls for it. So you mentioned on another podcast how you actually got out of New York before 9/11 because you have a psychic relative.
Yeah.
So can you explain like how that whole thing happened? And then what are your views on the topic of like psychic mediums and all of those things?
Wow, there's about 6 things baked into there. Okay.
Sorry.
So again, I tend to be more evidentiary than anything. And I have a relative who's psychic, and she called me up in August 2001 and said, "What are you doing the first 2 weeks of September?" I said, "Well, I'm working. I've got stuff to do." And she said, "Well, I want you to take a trip. I want you out of New York City the first 2 weeks of September." Um, I was like, I can't just, take a break. I'm right in the middle of a bunch of stuff. But
Did she say why or just
no, she just said, "I want you out of New York City." She said, "You need a break. I want you to leave." And she kept calling every couple of days. And finally, I was like, I do need a break. I'm pretty wrecked. So I went to Switzerland to visit some friends of mine from India that were bringing the new baby to visit up there. So I went out there, and then I'm in Switzerland. 9/11 happens, and a couple of days after that, I look at my calendar and I noticed I had a meeting in the World Trade Center that Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., which I canceled to go on this trip.
wow.
So when I could get through, I asked this relative of mine, "Holy shit, did you know?" And she's like, "I knew something bad was going to happen. I knew you should not be there." Um,
Wow.
and I've gone to enough psychics, and I went to one who was like ridiculously accurate. What you would do is you'd give them she'd give you a deck of playing cards, and you'd shuffle the deck and cut the deck and hand it back, and she'd hit record on a cassette player and start flipping the cards over and speaking for 90 minutes. You wouldn't say a single word. And after 90 minutes, she'd hit stop, hand you the cassette, and that was it. And she charged like $40 for this or something, right? And she was also freakishly accurate. And once I asked her, how do you do this? Like because you've got no information. I'm sitting here like a stone. All you have are those playing cards. How are you able to tell that I was in a German speaking country when 9/11 happened, type of thing? And she gave me the best metaphor I've heard for psychic phenomena. And she said, imagine you're driving a car down the road, and it's the road of your life type of thing. And I'm sitting in the car with you when you come and see me. You can see 20 feet out the front of the car. For whatever reason, I can see a mile down the road. I don't know why. So I can see if you keep going, this is where you're going to end up. You could turn at any point, in which case all bets are off. And I can see behind where you've been, right? I can see 2 miles down below, and I can see a mile ahead. And I thought that was the best framing I've ever heard, where they kind of look at your energy or interpret stuff about you and come up with something. How they come up with specifics like I've seen, I don't know, because that's just a whole other level of surrealness. So you can't really take it for granted. You just kind of go, well, that's interesting. What do you do with that? And you kind of go with it and see keep an open mind and be evidentiary as it shows up.
You're watching the highlights from a conversation on our live show, Memes and Markets. Be sure to subscribe to this channel to make sure that you don't miss the best parts of our conversation from our live streams, where we go live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Now, back to the highlights.
I've never heard you talk about like aliens or the UFO phenomenon very much. What is your 2 cents on that subject?
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And we lack that.
And we really lack the extraordinary evidence part. Easy to make the claims. You have to remember, if you go back a few thousand years when most of our early religions were formed, right? If somebody said, yeah, I saw a 900-foot Jesus in my backyard, there was no reason to disbelieve them. You go, they sound pretty credible. Why not? I'll believe them, right? And that's how religions grew up. Today, people are like, where's the Instagram video? And if you don't have that, forget about it, right? And now we were entering the deep fake era where you kind of question it anyway. So you need that evidentiary basis. I will suggest that it's near impossible for a religion to appear today. And it has to do with what do we mean by truth. And I can get into that if you want.
Please, yeah.
You want to get into that?
Yes, very much so.
You guys are right out there. Okay. So there was I do a late night kind of a French salon session that I do for all the Singularity events and the Peter's conferences and stuff. It's like a discussion on metaphysics, philosophy, and the meaning of life. Alcohol mandatory, that type of thing. And I start off with a discussion on truth, because we get lost in what the hell do we mean by truth. And there was a philosopher in the 50s called Arthur Koestler, who came up with a really interesting framing for truth. And he said, knowledge equals justified true belief. Okay. And so I was a recovering management consultant, so I graphed a 2x2 on whether something is more true or less true on the y-axis. Okay. And either something is more justifiable or less justifiable on the x-axis. Okay. So if you've got stuff that's true and justifiable, it tends to be scientific truth. That's the top right, where you've got evidentiary basis for something. Third parties can repeat your experiment and show that if I throw this ball in this angle, it's going to land over there at that spot, right? And we can run those calculations and figure it out. If you go to the top left, you have truths that are maybe true but not justifiable. Okay, so those are like psychic phenomena, sixth sense, intuition, intuitive truths, right? So I may see a 900-foot Jesus in my dreams, but I don't have the evidentiary basis to show that's true. It may be true, but it's not justifiable. Okay. On the bottom left, you've got stuff that's not true, but it is justifiable. Right. So a lot of stereotypes fit into this quadrant, like Italians are loud, right? And generally it's true, but for a particular Italian, it may or may not be true. But the stereotype is true. There's an old joke in Europe that says, in heaven, the cooks are French, the police are English, the lovers are Italian and the Swiss organize everything, right? And in hell, the cooks are English, the police are German, the lovers are Swiss, and the Italians organize everything. And that's an example of a stereotypical truth, right? It's general in the broad sense, but not general. And then on the bottom left, you've got stuff that's not justifiable and not true. And those tend to be religious truths or absolute truths or assumptive truths. Like Mary was a virgin is an assumptive truth, right? Muhammad is the last prophet is an assumptive truth. You're asked to assume that and as a point of faith, and then you build your religious structures on top of that. Once you see that, then it becomes much easier to have a discussion about what's real or what's not real. You can say, okay, that's an intuitive truth, that's a stereotypical truth, et cetera, et cetera. Most people take absolute truths and relate to them as true rather than relating to it as a belief system, right? So I'll give you a real anecdote here. So I was at the Vatican, okay, because they called me up once saying, hey, the Pope's got the worst immune system ever. Can we have you come in and do a conversation? And I did a workshop for the 80 most senior leaders there. I was talking to the historian at the Vatican, okay? The guy ran the archives. I said, listen, if you talk to biblical scholars, the general consensus is that the Mary was a virgin framing is in translation error. Okay. And it turns out if you talk to any biblical scholar, they'll tell you this, that when they translated the Bible from Hebrew to Aramaic, they used to use the young maiden Mary. When they translated it to Aramaic, there was no word for young maiden, so they used the word virgin. Okay? And every historian will tell you, yeah, you can see in the version control problem, and it changed from young maiden to virgin. And so I said to the historian at the Vatican, is that true? And he's like, oh yeah, it's true. It's a translation error. I'm like, wow, why don't you fix it? And he's like, are you kidding? You can't fix that. You can't. It's too baked into everything to do with Catholicism. You can't fix it. And you're like, wow, the whole premise of the religion is based on a translation error. Okay? And so that's what I mean by an absolute truth, right? It's patently not true, but it's definitely justifiable, or it ends up being justifiable. And so the problem with religions is most people will take belief structures and they will relate to those belief structures as true.
Wait, this was only part one of the conversation that we had on our live show, Memes and Markets. If you enjoyed this, then you're definitely going to like the next part of our conversation, which you can find here.